In the last 10 years, singing for Elbow has taken me all around the world, and we've been lucky enough to share the bill with literally some of the greatest musicians of our time. I'm always banging on about my famous duet with Frank Black in Memphis, and meeting John Cale and him agreeing to play chess with me that time. But ever the most astonishing thing I've witnessed firsthand was my next guest opening her set to a festival crowd in Portugal some years ago. She stood alone with a guitar, performing her song Rid of Me with such passion and energy that for a moment when she stopped, you could have heard a pin drop, and there was at least 20,000 people witnessing it. I was then thrown off the side of the stage by her tour manager, but I'll remember it till I'm dead. I'm very happy to say that we're joined now by PJ Harvey. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. In fact, I remember exactly what you're talking about as well. Yeah,
it was
amazing. I mean, you yourself will know. Sometimes you feel such a undescribably. I don't know. I just remember at that festival, I felt so much love coming off the audience, and I'd never really experienced that to that extent before. It was quite overwhelming, and I felt very tearful throughout the whole concert because of it. But just the people were so warm, and it was almost as if they needed that music so badly and passionately. Just to describe it for everyone, it was a festival way out in the Algarve. It was quite a bizarre setting. It had been a very warm, dusty day. And do you remember seeing lots of people walking to the festival? Because the people that were looking after us were explaining to us that people would save up their wages for the whole year to go to this festival, and then they couldn't afford transport, so they'd actually walk there.
Yeah. And it was a good walk out of the main city as well, wasn't it? It was in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there was something going on there. I mean, I'm sort of... I wouldn't say that I believe in anything wholeheartedly that's spiritual. I know something goes on when there's a lot of people in one place together, but for fear of using this word because it's overused, you were definitely channeling something, whether it was those people's feelings for you or what. It was an incredible thing to witness.
Well, I, like you, I'm a bit reticent to dive in and say, it was a spiritual occurrence, but I agree. It was different. There was something very different about that crowd and that night. And I think many performers experience something like that at some point in their lives, but it happens so rarely that you don't forget it. And I've never forgotten that show.
I know exactly what you're saying. There's been the odd moment when I've been playing with Elbow that have perhaps kept me going for another couple of years. Just the sort of isolated occasion.
Yeah.
Something else I remember about that festival was my friend Sandy had moved out to Portugal some years before, and I like to try and speak in the native language wherever we play. And I asked him to translate something for me. I worked out that Elbow would be playing as the sun was going down. So I wanted to say before the last song, as we're a solar powered group, this is our last song. A not very funny gag, but said in Portuguese might have been kind of endearing. I said it, and there was a lot of confusion and some fists raised, and then I found out afterwards I'd actually said, "We rock with the power of the sun, good night," which was entirely the wrong message. Yeah. So well dropped in it. Thanks for that, Sandy. Okay, I'm going to ask some standard questions that I ask at the beginning of all my interviews. Where are you from?
I'm from Dorset, southwest England.
Okay, and are you from a big family, particularly?
No, I have one brother.
One brother, okay. A musical family?
Music-loving family, but not players of music.
Okay, so a lot of records played in the house.
Yes, met a fantastic vinyl record collection of my mother's and father's, and they were very into early blues music and also early Stones and Dylan and all of that stuff. Yeah. So
that's so Dylan, Stones. What else from that era?
That really of their sort of contemporary era, and then all of their other collection would be John Lee Hooker, Captain Beefheart,
that makes a lot of sense.
Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. Your style of guitar playing is very sparing, rocky and bluesy.
I mean, I learnt to play guitar playing along with John Lee Hooker and Captain Beefheart, a mixture of the two. I used to learn all of the intricate solo lines off the Beefheart albums.
Yeah. Do you know, it's funny you should say that. Beefheart came up in a conversation I was having recently with a friend. I told a friend of mine, Pete, who's in the band I Am Clute, that I was going to be speaking to you. And we were talking about musicians that exist in like a little land of their own. It followed a conversation with another guy about how when he grew up he thought the Beatles was a country because of all the different images associated with the band. And Beefheart's one of those people that's in his own place to such an extent that you can't really touch him, you can't really lump him in with someone else. And we were trying to put our finger on it, like what is it that gives somebody their own thing like that? And we were saying that you have that as well. You've sort of established yourself as doing something that nobody else does the way you do it. And sort of, I thought it might be important to pass that on to you.
Well, no, that's yeah, that's a lovely thing to hear you say, because I know that it's very important to me that I try and find new ground. It always has been since I was much younger, and even at art school, that I was much more interested in finding new work than just making something that was good, but something that was already done. You know,
so I mean, as far as that's concerned, then the sort of the originality, the sort of doing a piano album now at this stage, is that stretching yourself? Is that putting yourself deliberately somewhere that you're not necessarily comfortable in order to try and find something new? Absolutely.
That's the sole reason I try and do anything really these days. And I think also, having been making records for the last 15 years or so, it becomes more important to me to put myself in territory that's unfamiliar, frightening, that's going to bring out in myself things I wouldn't have been capable of finding unless I'd done that.
This is something that I was going to touch on. I was trying to put my finger on what it is that I love about all the music that I really sort of love, yours included. And I think it is a level of honesty and the feeling that somebody's given of themselves and put something of themselves in the music. Not necessarily played to the best of their abilities, but invested something personal into the music. I would like to claim to have been a fan since the very beginning, but I have to admit to coming on board around to Bring You My Love. That album in particular sounds like it was very emotionally expensive at times, and then at the same time, in a different mood, it sounds like it might have been lots of fun to make as well. I suppose that, well, I know that when a record's out and you've done promoting it, it gains its own character. How do you think about that album?
I feel it was a very, very important album for me. It was, in a way, my first movement away from what I'd been doing prior to that. So I was already feeling restless about covering the same ground, and I wanted to force myself into unknown areas, which led me on to choosing to work with very different people and writing in a very different way. I mean, it was at that stage on To Bring You My Love that I began to write with keyboards and other different types of percussion instruments, and I was moving away from guitar already then, but also trying to think into a different lyrical landscape and look outside of myself and begin to use the idea of storytelling. So that was the first sort of chapter of movement, I think, a very important album. And
so when you say sort of different territory in terms of keyboards and things, and were you writing the songs groove upwards rather than lyrics first and things like that? Were you changing the order that you wrote things in?
Well, up until that point, I think I'd very much written words that came out of rhythmic response to the guitar part or the guitar riffs that I was working with. It was much simpler, and it was much more rhythmic use of word rather than their content or what they were saying. And it was at that point that I began to become interested in almost short storytelling through song, and I guess moving more toward the folk tradition of that, of where song comes from, in that it is storytelling from one to another. Yeah,
this is something that comes through a lot in your lyrics. This sort of I've chosen a song to play off To Bring You My Love. I've chosen The Dancer, because it relates to that theme that you were talking about, folklore. And another theme that pops up a lot in your music, especially in the last album as well, it's these dark, brooding, devilish men that turn up in your songs quite a lot. The male character in this song says to the narrator at one point, "Dance for me, fanciulla gentile," which is the loveliest way I've ever heard of saying gentle girl, lovely girl. So I've chosen to play the dancer. So if you don't mind, for everyone listening, here it